Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Do you hear anything? Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Good now? How it's catching? Oh, it's catching from this mic as well, no? Maybe. Once in computers. Hare Krishna. Yeah, that's what. If that doesn't work, your phone will catch. No, I'll go outside and check on this. Maybe. You tell me if you hear it. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It's catching. Then it's working. Routing.
I may speak a little fast because I was covering it. Can you see the screen? Look at there. Okay, don't worry about it. Title: Extraordinary Journey. Subtitle: One Man's Improbable Journey into a Million Hearts. So you all know, but now we're going to go back in time to when Srila Prabhupada was 25 years old and living in Calcutta. And this painting, very nice painting, of Srila Prabhupada meeting for the first time with Bhakti Siddhanta on the rooftop of a property in Ulka Dunga Junction Road. Now it looks a little different than it looked then. It made it very nice. But there's Srila Prabhupada in the foreground with a little mustache there. That's Prabhupada. Because Prabhupada, when he was 25, he was a college student, married, and was a Gandhi follower. Because intellectual people in his time, that's what they did. You know, that was the Gandhi followers. So the very first meeting, the way that it's described, practically as soon as Srila Prabhupada sat down, he was brought by a friend because Prabhupada, the friend said, let's go. Here, there's this wonderful sadhu. Prabhupada said, my father, he brought so many sadhus to our home. They weren't really sadhus. I met so many sadhus. Thanks, but no thanks. And the reply was, no, he's special. Please trust me. We're friends, and I want you to meet him. So he relented, and he went. And practically as soon as he sat down, immediately, Bhaktisiddhanta pointed him out. He singled him out. You are an educated young man. Why don't you push Chaitanya's message throughout the whole world? And that was 1922 when Srila Prabhupada was 25 years old. 14 years later,
Sorry.
however, initially didn't go in. Prabhupada objected, or he voiced a Gandhi message. Who will hear your Chaitanya message? We're a dependent country. First, India must become independent of Swaraj, freedom from the British. How can we spread Indian culture if we're under British rule? Reasonable. Outside of India, who's going to listen? 20 minutes at the response to that question. Very comprehensive. Here's some little pieces. In a deep voice, that Krishna consciousness didn't have to wait for a change of Indian politics, nor was it dependent on who ruled. Krishna consciousness was so important, so exclusively important, it could not wait. Politics are always changing, but there's one eternal truth. No, you notice this is a certain painting of, and the posture of Srila Prabhupada's right, or Bhaktisiddhanta's right hand is taken from a photograph. Whether one power or another ruled was a temporary situation, but the eternal reality is Krishna consciousness, and the real self is the spirit soul. No man-made political system, therefore, could actually help humanity. This was the verdict of the Vedic scriptures and the line of spiritual masters. 20 minutes worth. Here's some. Although everyone is an eternal servant of God, when one takes himself to be the temporary body and regards the nation of his birth as worshipable, he comes under illusion. The leaders and followers of the world's political movements, including the movement of Swaraj, were simply cultivating this illusion. Like you put on the boxing gloves and let it all happen. Real welfare work, whether individual, social, or political, should help prepare a person for his next life and help him reestablish his eternal relationship with the Supreme, etc. Now, Prabhupada's comment later was, since childhood, he was always good at debate, and he never lost a debate. It doesn't matter what the topic was. But for the first time, he was defeated in debate, and he was very happy. Because I've met someone that has genuine transcendental wisdom. Remember that year they met for the first time in 1922? And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur offered initiation in 1933 in Allahabad, Prayag, and he did something quite unusual. He gave him first and second initiation at the same time. And that's pretty quick. But, later, 35, 2 years after his initiation, this shows Srila Prabhupada. The background, look carefully, it's Radhakund. And annually, Bhaktisiddhanta took devotees to places of pilgrimage in Vrindavan. And one year, November 1935, Prabhupada was with him. And Bhaktisiddhanta gave the second big instruction that went into his heart. I had a desire to print some books. If you ever get money, print books. Short and direct. And that went in. And that's a dedication to those two missions. 36, 1 year later, 1 year and 1 month. I am fully confident that you can explain in English our thoughts and arguments to the people who are not conversant with the languages of the other members, meaning outside of India. Outside of India, there's multiple languages. But outside of India, people aren't conversant with the Indian languages. This will do much good to yourself as well as your audience. Now, he's first saying English, but to people who don't speak our language means anywhere. There's details that time doesn't permit. During this period of time, Srila Prabhupada had an opportunity, he thought, to go to Tokyo, which wasn't English speaking. Then it didn't happen for different reasons. That's a whole other topic. But he was empowered to go outside of India, which was Bhaktisiddhanta's empowerment, which was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's empowerment, which was Lord Chaitanya's empowerment. And he received that empowerment. I have every hope you can turn yourself into a very good English preacher if you serve the mission to inculcate the novel impression of Lord Chaitanya's teachings unto the people in general, as well as philosophers and religionists. Notice, people in general, as well as certain class of individuals, that they're movers of people in general. So, next, Prabhupada started a habit that became the habit for the rest of his life, that in the wee hours of the morning, when most people are horizontal, he was writing. And the image shows the persons who inspired their writing are these two, Bhaktivinoda and Bhaktisiddhanta. Srila Prabhupada took both these instructions as his life's mission, a period of deep reflection and study. Followed Srila Prabhupada's meeting with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Prabhupada greatly revered this scholarly spiritual teacher and read his writings assiduously, and Bhaktisiddhanta wrote assiduously. The life and works of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, also revealed much to Srila Prabhupada about the spiritual heritage of Krishna consciousness and helped inspire him to propagate the science of devotional service throughout the English language, through the English language. Now, many of you will know, but some of you may not know. The year that Srila Prabhupada was born was 1896. In the year of 1896, also Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote a book and distributed it to universities all around the world, because the philosophers and educated people, at least his view was, at least these people should know who was Lord Chaitanya, because Lord Chaitanya wasn't so well known in India, what to speak of outside of India, but he wanted people to know. On the year of Prabhupada's birth, he did it. Some number of copies out of his own pocket, and a two-part. It's important. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his life and precepts. Part 1 was his life. Part 2 was his precepts. Part 1 was a mini summary of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And precepts In Bhaktivinoda Thakur's 100 books, about 90% of those 100 books had the following: the 10 essential teachings of Lord Chaitanya, 1 through 10. Like, so it's like simple, but profound. And that was the second half of the book, the Dasamula Tattva, the 10 essential teachings, life and teaching, life and precepts of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And etc., etc., etc. So the way in which Srila Prabhupada received the summary distilled version of Gaudiya Vaishnavism was through these two great personalities. And in 1953, at the age of 57, he had developed a very well-established pharmaceutical business. His birth name was Abai, and the family name was Day, D-E, Abai Day. When he was initiated, it became Abai Charan Day, or Abai Charan Das. And when he took sannyas, it became AC, that's Abai Charan, Bhakti Vedanta, given by Bhakti Siddhanta, gave the name Bhakti Vedanta Swami, and that's the name he went by, AC Bhakti Vedanta Swami. So during this period of time, he's still a householder. You see, with a nice little mustache there in the middle of his advertisement. And, you know, the pharmaceutical business was rising and becoming very, it was like very successful. It was predicted by astrologers that he would become one of the most successful, wealthy Indian people. And then Krishna pulled the plug. And, you know, it turned him upside down, but he understood this is Krishna's arrangement and accepted it as Krishna's arrangement. And in course of time, some other things happened without all those other things. And he decided it's time that I should retire from household life and my business life and dedicate myself to this mission that Bhakti Siddhanta entrusted me with, and Bhakti Vinod Thakur, etc. The reciprocal succession. And so he accepted the Vanaprastha stage of life. And when he was 60 years old, this is a photograph of Keshigat. And you see the Madan Mohan temple in the background. And it's a nice Yamuna River photograph. And he accepted residence in a very simple place. Here's the room in that very simple place. You know, he went from being a wealthy householder to living in a little room. And the little room where he stayed, he had a certain number of steps to walk up to, and it was 4 walls. And there was no sink, there was no toilet, there was no kitchen, 4 walls. And this is where he began the Hare Krishna movement. They didn't call it that at that time. It was just he was writing, translating, and writing commentary on Bhakti, Srimad Bhagavatam, and also following Bhakti Siddhanta, some magazine. He called his magazine. Bhakti Siddhanta had different names, one in Hindi, one in English, one in Bengali. Prabhupada calls his magazine Back to Godhead. We're all familiar with that one. But it started way back. And he would go regularly into Delhi from Vrindavan in his Vanaprastha stage to preach from the Back to Godhead magazine, but he was also wanting to find people who could help sponsor the printing of Srimad Bhagavatam, because this time he left all his wealth, whatever he had, with his family. He didn't take anything. So he was depending on whatever Krishna sent. And Back to Godhead magazine was a way to meet people and find potential donors for his publication work while he was working on Srimad Bhagavatam. And as time passed, there was one sannyasi in Mathura, also a godbrother of his, Keshava. Maharaj. There's a nice story about Keshava Maharaj, but time doesn't permit. So here's a photograph of Prabhupada accepting sannyas in 1959. So it's A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. And the Prabhupada title came later. So on either side, two sannyasis. Keshava Maharaj was encouraging him. Prabhupada was feeling not qualified in all of those statements. But he was insisting, you must, because Bhaktisiddhanta has given you this important responsibility, and it'll facilitate your service to Bhaktisiddhanta, so do for that reason. And so he accepted sannyas, 1959. And in course of time, he shifted from where he was by Keshikat to the Radha Damodar temple. There's some details of how that happened. Vishvambar Goswami, who had become very dear to Prabhupada and vice versa. Vishvambar Goswami was the chief priest of the Radharaman temple, and they loved each other very much. Vishvambar Goswami happened to know the head priest or the head person at the Radha Damodar temple, and there were 2 rooms, and he persuaded that organizer to give those rooms to the Swami to make good use of them. So, etc., etc. Prabhupada shifted from Keshigat to Radha Damodar temple. And the photograph was taken much later, obviously, but Prabhupada is looking out the window while he's taking his prasadam, and he's looking at the samadhi of Rupa Goswami. And here's a photograph during the daylight hours of the samadhi of Rupa Goswami. And there's details of how the samadhi Rupa Goswami was established. It was established by Jiva. Jiva was his only disciple, Jiva Goswami. And when Rupa Goswami left this world, he placed his body in samadhi in the courtyard of the Radha Damodar temple, and there's the samadhi. Many times, I'm going to tell a nice story in a moment, of Srila Prabhupada praying intently. You see, the letters are very small, but I read it. Hey Rupa, in the dead of night, in Vrindavan there weren't street lights and flashlights and any of those kind of things. It was just dark of night. And Prabhupada had a broom, and with the broom he was sweeping in front of his samadhi, calling out loudly, Hey Rupa, hey Sanatan, hey Guru Dev, please give me your mercy. Without your mercy, I cannot do anything. Give me the mercy. Give me the strength that I may fulfill your orders. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta gave the order, but he's the order deliverer from this succession, from his father and from Rupa Goswami and Lord Chaitanya. He's depending fully on their mercy. On one occasion, Srila Prabhupada had this vision, one of those nights that he was working. Rupa Goswami appeared before him. No, transcendentally past personalities can manifest themselves, and they manifested himself to Prabhupada, reassuring Prabhupada, encouraging Prabhupada, hearing the fervent prayer of Prabhupada. Maharaj, don't worry about anything. Go ahead and travel to the West and preach. Just preach the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the chanting of Hare Krishna. You will be successful. I guarantee, because I'll be right there with you all the time. Wow. Now, some of the devotees were engaged in interviewing individuals. One of those individuals they interviewed was this fellow. It's actually the fellow. It's not just something off the internet. This is Hridayananda Babaji Maharaj. This fellow, this Babaji, was born at Radhakund, and he had been 78 years a pujari, and he lived near the Radha Damodar temple. And the devotees that were doing these interviews sat down with him and asked him if he knew Srila Prabhupada. And the Babaji began to cry. I'm going to try to not cry as I read this. very moving. Never have I seen anyone do sadhana like he did. I've lived my life in Brunja. I've never seen anyone like him. Prabhupada did many arduous things. He worked very hard at the Radha Damodar temple. At that time, it was very austere, undeveloped, very muddy and dirty with no facilities. And he described you would hear him in the dead of night because he lived nearby. Loud enough. He wasn't living in the compound. He was nearby. You could hear him. He went in to see what's going on. Prabhupada was on his hands and knees before the samadhi. Rupa Goswami praying for the strength, the capacity, the empowerment. So then during the interview, this Babaji said, when I heard that it was actually he who had been chosen by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to spread the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra around the world, I was not surprised. So something happened after that. So Prabhupada's feeling, I need the mercy, but also feeling the weight of the mandate. So something happened in the course of his preaching. In the course of his preaching, he was at a person's house, a Mathura businessman in Agra. Mathura businessman in Agra. And in the course of that meeting with this, home program, this gentleman, Mr. Agarwal, confided his heart in Prabhupada and said, my son Gopal, he went to America to become an engineer. And he married American lady so he could get his green card. I'm worried about my son. And Prabhupada did whatever Prabhupada did, and then he wrote a letter to Gopal Agarwal and said, would you be so kind as to send me a letter of invitation, so with that letter of invitation I can get a 30-day tourist visa to go to America? So Prabhupada got such a letter. Now, many of you have seen this nice little photograph of Prabhupada playing with bridge. Little boy. This is the big boy. This is bridge grown up. And so Gopal wrote the letter. Prabhupada went to the immigration department, and sure enough, he got a visa. Now, he had to get a passport to get the visa, but he didn't have anything. His residence was the Radha Damodar temple. So little by little by little. So now he's working on the Bhagavatam, got some donors to pay for the printing, though it hadn't finished yet. Now he's got a visa and the mandate. Now how to get there. So in the course of circumstances, one of the places he visited was in Bombay, and you recognize Sumati Morarji. She was the owner of a steamship company, one of which was the Jaladuta, the Scindia Steamship Company. So Prabhupada asked her, you own cargo ships. Please give me one room in one of your cargo ships that's going to America. And she rained on the parade. She said, no, Swamiji, you're old and you've never had climate like that, and crossing the sea, and you won't live. And Prabhupada so it took several times around, and finally she relented. So Prabhupada has his passport, and he has a visa, and he has transportation, he has the mandate, and he's feeling unqualified. But somehow. And there we go. Prabhupada's getting on the Jaladuta. There's the date of his departure in Calcutta. It said the ship is from Bombay, but the place where he got on the ship is in Calcutta. There's Friday, August 13, 1965. And a 38-day journey, and Yadavar isn't here. But Yadavar was eventually given the diary that Prabhupada kept while he was in the boat. And then now it's published and available. So he was reasoning like this. In America, it'd be different than a sannyasi interacting with pious and influential Indian gentlemen. There'd be no one, a foreigner, and there was no tradition of sadhus, no temples, no free ashrams. But so going to visit people and ask for some assistance, that's what he did when he was in India. But what's going to happen on the other side of the ocean? But when he thought of the books he was bringing, transcendental knowledge in English, he became confident. When he met someone in America, he would give him a flyer. Notice there's a flyer. Prabhupada looks very stern and serious, and he even spells Bhagavatam differently than he later spelled Bhagavatam. And India's message of peace and goodwill. If you're going to America and you don't know American people, that's a nice way to introduce it. India's message of peace and goodwill. It can mean anything, right? But that's what he did. Then on board, Jaladuta. Today, the captain arranged, this is Janmashtami Day, on board. He arranged for a meeting on board the Jaladuta on account of Janmashtami Day, and I spoke for an hour on the philosophy and teachings of Lord Sri Krishna. All the officers attended the meeting, and there was distribution of prasadam. The matter was radiographed to Srimati Sumati Rararji in Bombay. The ship is stranded on the Arabian Sea, about 4 miles away from the coast. Something happened and they got stuck. Then later on in the journey, his Bhagavatams were loaded at Cochin. He makes note of how that was done. 5 cases loaded onto the cargo ship. And so there's his wonderful 3-volume Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1. And in his diary, this is what shows happened. At one point, he had a heart attack. He had the second heart attack. So no entries. And later, along with just regular old seasickness, headache and nausea, vomiting and dizziness and hunger and no energy, it's not easy. Prabhupada one evening with a few disciples at his feet reminisced about how he had come to America in 1965 and had suffered 2 heart attacks at sea. They say that anyone who gets a 3rd heart attack, they must expire. I had 2 heart attacks on the ship. And then New York, 3rd one, paralyzed. Left side was paralyzed. I do not know how I was saved. And one girl, the captain's wife, she studied astrology. She said, Swami, if you can survive your 70th year, then you'll live for 100 years. So much for astrologers. Oops. Now, notice in the painting, there's a ship in the background. There's a Jaladuta, and behind the Jaladuta, there's another big ship. There's Radha and Krishna and avatars of the Lord and so forth and so on. That same night that he had this heart attack, he had a dream. It's described in Vilamrita. And the dream, in his dream, he saw this giant boat, and the giant boat was being rowed by the avatars. Here's another painting showing the same, making sure that he made it to the shore. There's Prabhupada and Krishna in the very front in the Bhagavatam, etc. They ensured that he would make it all the way to America. So we're not there yet. September 10. Our date is not yet, but we're past September 10. This is Radhanath Maharaj. We read this today on the boat. I'm feeling separation from Sri Vrindavan. And my Lord, Sri Govinda, Gopinath, Radha Damodar, the only solace is Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which I am tasting, the nectarine of Lord Chaitanya's Leela. I left Bharat Bhumi just to execute the order of Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati in pursuance of Lord Chaitanya's order. I have no qualification, but I have taken up the risk This is after his 2 heart attacks, just to carry out the order of his divine grace. I depend fully on their mercy, so far away from Vrindavan. So that's on the 10th September, and here's the 13th September. Today, I disclose my mind to my companion, Lord Sri Krishna. There is a Bengali poem made by me today in this connection in Bengali. The captain told me they had never such calmness of the Atlantic Ocean. I said, it's Lord Krishna's mercy. His wife asked me to come back again with him so they can cross again in a calm Atlantic Ocean. If Atlantic would have shown its usual face, perhaps I would have died. But Lord Krishna has taken charge of the ship. So here we are on the fateful day, September 17th, 1965. This is later Prabhupada's visiting the Boston Harbor at Commonwealth Pier, where we had a little gathering today. And they arrived at 5:30 in the morning. Now there's a little document that Mitra Sain Prabhu has. We just need to receive it from Mitra Sain somehow or another. Is Mitra Sain here? Okay. Yeah. You somehow help us get a copy. We'll circulate it to the congregation members here. But the document that we're going to send you says Prabhupada came off the boat with the captain, and the captain gave a little tour to sanctify the Commonwealth Pier area, the little where he took them in Boston. So that was the first arrival date. And in addition, Prabhupada wrote this. I'm going to read the verses. This is the text, but I'm going to read the verses of what Prabhupada wrote. This Markine Bhagavad Dharma. I'm keeping track of time because I want to keep the schedule. But it's worth taking some time to read these words. My dear Lord Krishna, you are so kind upon this useless soul, but I do not know why you have brought me here. Now you can do whatever you like with me. But I guess you have some business here. Otherwise, why would you bring me to this terrible place? Most of the population here is covered by the material modes of ignorance and passion, absorbed in material life. They think themselves very happy and satisfied, and therefore they have no taste for the transcendental message of Vasudeva. I do not know how they will be able to understand it. Mission impossible. But I know your causeless mercy can make everything possible because you are the most mystic, expert mystic. How will they understand the levels of devotional service? Oh Lord, I am simply praying for your mercy so that I'll be able to convince them about your message. All living entities have come under the control of the illusory energy by your will, and therefore, if you like, by your will, they can also be released from the clutches of illusion. I wish that you may deliver them. Therefore, if you so desire their deliverance, then only will they be able to understand your message. The words of Srimad Bhagavatam are your incarnation, and if a sober person repeatedly receives it with submissive oral reception, then he will be able to understand your message. He will become liberated from the influence of the modes of ignorance and passion, and thus all inauspicious things accumulated in the core of the heart will disappear. How will I make them understand the message of Krishna consciousness? I'm very unfortunate, unqualified, and the most fallen. Therefore, I'm seeking your benediction so that I can convince them, for I am powerless to do so on my own. Somehow or other, Lord Krishna, you have brought me here. to speak about you. Now, my Lord, it's up to you to make me a success or failure as you like. O spiritual master of all the worlds, I can simply repeat your message. So, if you like, you can make my power of speaking suitable for their understanding. Only by your causeless mercy will my words become pure. I am sure that when the transcendental message penetrates their hearts, they will certainly feel gladdened and thus become liberated from all unhappy conditions of life. And the conclusion, oh Lord, I'm just like a puppet in your hands. So if you have brought me here to dance, make me dance, oh Lord, make me dance as you like. I have no devotion, nor do I have any knowledge, but I have strong faith in the holy name of Krishna. I am designated as Bhakti Vedanta, and now, if you like, you can fulfill the real purport of Bhakti Vedanta. So there we are. Prabhupada has arrived. This is his prayer to Krishna, his friend, Krishna. And from the Boston Harbor in a day's journey, he made it on the 38th day to New York. And as you've heard many, many times, he's walking down the gangplank in New York Harbor, and he said he didn't know whether to turn left or right. There was no one there to receive him. No Tengu Chabo. He had no money in his pocket. And in New York City, and, it's a rough place, New York City. Mission Impossible. He's got his Bhagavatams in the book, in the boat. And where do you go at the end of the gangplank? That somehow he made it to the Port Authority and got on a bus. How he got from bus fare, I don't know. The bus fare to Butler, Pennsylvania, and met Gopal Agarwal and Sally Agarwal in Little Bridge. He stayed there for a little while, and then that wasn't his purpose in coming to America, thinking about Pennsylvania. So he came back to New York with no place to stay, no money, nothing, nothing. Kind of scary, but fearless, not foolish, just fearless. Somehow Krishna will take care of him, and Krishna somehow took care of him with hardship and many other things. So we're deeply indebted. This is a day for honoring all over many parts of the world. There are big, big festivals that we just had today here in Boston, but all outside of Boston, all over the world, big festivals honoring what we're honoring here. And it's nice to be here, honoring Prabhupada's arrival in Boston so many years ago, carrying the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now I have 4.5 minutes, so I'm going to say one more thing. Prabhupada explained that many of his disciples were given the same instruction that he was given by Bhaktisiddhanta. It wasn't like many persons. And one of the very primary efforts that Bhaktisiddhanta made during his time was sending two of the very prominent sannyasis, Ban Maharaj and another, to go to England, English-speaking England, that had ruled India for so long, and they had support. They had people waiting for them on the other side. They had funding. The plan was, the executed plan was that the many Gaudiya Math temples each gave a donation, and they had something in their pocket, some money in their pocket, and somebody receiving them on the other end. Prabhupada didn't have any of that. But the departure, there was a big festival when they finally went, but the departure was delayed because Bhaktisiddhanta wanted something. It wasn't ready yet. What he wanted was the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So there was one professor who was writing the book. It wasn't done yet. Professor in Orissa. So the book finally became this Sri Krishna, Sri Chaitanya. So when Prabhupada came with the mandate of taking the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, it was Srimad Bhagavatam, because the teaching of Lord Chaitanya, the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, the teaching of Srimad Bhagavatam, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, seamless. And notice in the introduction section is the life of Lord Chaitanya. Prabhupada knew exactly what he was doing, and he was following it, the template that was given to him in his own way, but empowered to carry it forward in a way that Krishna inspired him to carry it forward. And what a gift to the world, to us followers, and to the world that they're somewhere or another they'll receive a book, or somewhere or another they'll hear the chanting, or somewhere or another they take prashadam, or somewhere or another something. And our in exchange with them should be, appropriate as a Vaishnava to someone who's struggling in the world. It's a nice service. It's our life. So I'm going to end. Keep the timing. And so whatever's next, whoever's our MC can take the microphone and tell everybody what you'd like them to do. An honor to the schedule. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you. Since we have many Srila Prabhupada disciples, kind enough to allow this session to be shared by somebody else. So we have this Srila Prabhupada, who had been in Boston Temple in 1971, and he's, as he had mentioned in his memories, that he was initiated in 1971 at 49 Beacon Street when Srila Prabhupada was being installed first time by Srila Prabhupada. He had many fond memories, and he knows a lot of details about the Boston Temple back then. And also he had a great association of Srila Prabhupada. So I would like to request Prabhu, please speak, share some memories. Do you want? That's perfectly clear.
Namaho Vishnu Padaya Krishna Dasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Nevase Shasunyavadi Pastatade Shatarma. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you for asking me to speak. It's a great honor to speak in front of so many wonderful Vaishnavas. I was very fortunate that I happened to be living in the Boston Temple when Srila Prabhupada came. How much time do I have? Just wondering. Anybody else keep speaking and you want me to stop, just give me a sign. Srila Prabhupada sent Radha Gopi Vallabha to Boston. There was 3 sets of deities that were identical that got donated to Srila Prabhupada. And one of those is the Chota, the little Radha Madhava in Mayapur. The other one is in Berkeley, Radha Krishna in Berkeley, and Radha Gopi Vallabha. So Srila Prabhupada personally sent them to Boston. And when they arrived, I don't remember the date, but they came by boat, and Rukmini Devi, Dasi, and Palika went down to the docks to pick up the deities. And when they got there, they had to fill out some papers. And one of the customs man said, well, how much are they worth? And so Rukmini Mataji said, that's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's priceless. You can't put a price on him. So the custom person wrote that down. They're priceless, and he wouldn't give them to them because he thought they were something like valuable, something antique or something coming from India. But they had to come back later and explain, and they got them. And so then they were stored in Boston, and they were preparing for the installation, making outfits. And at one time, I believe it was in May, anyways, there was about 10 of us in the Boston temple that were ready for initiation. I said a talk yesterday, I think it was, about how Boston was the biggest temple in ISKCON when I joined in the fall of 1970. We had 63 devotees. ISKCON Press was here. But in March of 71, ISKCON Press moved to New York. So all of a sudden, we became like a small temple. There was only like 12 devotees in the temple after that. So Satsrupa Maharaj, who was the temple president, he was actually the one who first came to Boston and started Boston. So he wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada recommending us for first initiation. And in the letter, and I remember when Satsrup got the letter, he read it to all the devotees in the hallway of the Boston temple. There's this picture of Narada Muni over there that used to be in the hallway of the old temple. I remember he was reading this letter that he got from Prabhupada right in front of that picture of Narada Muni. And it said, I don't remember all the beginning parts, but at the end he said, the devotees that you have recommended for first initiation, I will accept them as my disciples, but tell them to wait because I'll be coming to Boston to install the deities. And they said, and in the meantime, tell them to chant hard. And I looked for this letter in the portfolio or the folio, whatever it's called, but that letter is not there. I don't know what happened to that letter. But we were going around after that. What does it mean to chant hard? How do you chant hard in your japa? So we were out this for a week. We were really trying to chant hard as we could. Prabhupada told us to chant hard, whatever that meant, enthusiastically, whatever. But anyway, so he said he was coming and for us to wait. So finally, we got the date that Srila Prabhupada was coming to Boston. And I believe it was July 17th, 18th, and 19th that he was in Boston. I say believe because there's a little controversy. He didn't write any letters from that time. And he was also like in Detroit at the same time on the 17th in the morning, but he was in Boston in the evening. And on the 19th, he was in Boston in the morning, but he was in New York in the evening. But he was here the whole day on the 18th. And we were fixing up the temple, of course, for Srila Prabhupada to come. And I remember Satsrupa Maharaj, who was very busy all the time with his editing work. He came down to help us paint because we were repainting the whole temple. And I remember the ceiling, it was very dirty, it was white, but it was kind of blackish. So, we were trying to paint it white again. And we were showing Satsrup, how to paint, with a roller. But it needed 2 coats. It wasn't covering it with the first time. So one of the devotees said, you're doing it like this, but it's not the perfection. And Satsrup immediately said, no, this is the perfection. We're doing this devotional service. So that was his vision. So I told the story about, Prabhupada and coming to the airport. Everybody heard that one? Never did? Tell it again?
Yeah.
So, yeah, when we only had one van, and we all the devotees piled into the van, and we went to Logan Airport, and we got dropped off, and the driver went and parked the van, and we were there waiting for Srila Prabhupada to come. And a lot of devotees had come from, some came from Montreal. Sripati was the president, he brought devotees from Montreal. Sridham from Miami, Florida, drove all the way up to Boston just to see Srila Prabhupada. And devotees were coming from other places. And we were all gathered there, and in those days you could, just go right into the airport. There wasn't so much security. And we were right at the gate where Prabhupada was coming, and his plane, kind of rolled in. In those days, it would roll out stairs, and you had to walk down stairs onto the runway and then walk in. So we were having a big kirtan behind the glass, and all these people were coming out. And then finally, Srila Prabhupada, it seemed like it was the last person. He came out, and everybody just went ecstatic. Haribo, Haribo. And even though we were behind glass, Srila Prabhupada looked up at us, and smiled. There is a video of this, of Srila Prabhupada getting off the plane. He wasn't the last person getting off, but for years I thought he was. That's how I had remembered it. But he came into the airport. We brought just a little cushion. Satsrup sat Srila Prabhupada down on this one cushion. They put some garlands on him. He didn't stay there sitting on the cushion very long. Like I say, there's a lot of pictures of this time. I believe it's in the Boston's website. I also have some on my Facebook page of this whole visit of Srila Prabhupada in 1971. And Srila Prabhupada just started, walking really fast through the airport. We're all kind of trying to keep up, having a kirtan along with them. They had a car waiting for Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada got into the car, and Aravinda, Shyama Sundar, and Karandar were traveling with Srila Prabhupada. Excuse me. And they got in the car, and then the car drove off. And then, we wanted to go with Srila Prabhupada and greet him at the temple and be there at the temple when he got there. But I looked around, and the person who drove the van was like next to me. So we had to, wait there for him to go get the van out of parking and come back and pick us up. And I was really thinking that, how Lord Chaitanya prayed, like one moment is 12 years or more. We were feeling such, separation. Finally, just seeing Prabhupada, being there. And then all of a sudden he left, and we were stuck at the airport. It was actually traumatic for me, and I never went to see Srila Prabhupada in the airport again after that. I would always wait at the temple. Actually, if we have time, I can tell another story about how it actually worked out really good for me. anyways, one of my services at the Boston Temple was I was like the carpenter handyman, and we had made a new ISKCON for Srila Prabhupada. I got to make that. It wasn't so nice, but Srila Prabhupada actually sat on it in the back of the temple. So when we finally got back from the airport, Srila Prabhupada was already sitting on the ISKCON. He was already giving his lecture. I remember that the temple room was smoky with incense. They must have lit a lot of incense before he came. And he was speaking, and it was just, I remember hearing his voice. It was exactly how I had always heard the tapes. And it was exactly saying the same thing that was in his books, except he was there in person. And by the time we got back, he was just almost at the end of his lecture. And we had fixed up 2 rooms for Srila Prabhupada to use. They were the Brahmachari ashram and the Tulsi room. So all the brahmacharis were moved out, and we were going to sleep in the basement. So we had this one room for Srila Prabhupada. So after he finished speaking, brought Srila Prabhupada into the room. And they were just, Sridham was a temple president from Miami. He came up, he had Sandesh. He gave Srila Prabhupada Sandesh. And they were just, a few hellos. They weren't talking so much. And then Satsrup said, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, it's getting late and we've rented a hotel for you." And so Srila Prabhupada's eyes got very big. He said, "A hotel?" He said, "I'm not going." And he quoted a verse, and he said, the country is in the mode of goodness, the city is in the mode of passion, but a hotel is simply a brothel. I won't go. He said, "But the temple is Vaikuntha. I want to stay in Vaikuntha." And we were so happy. Srila Prabhupada wanted to stay at the temple, even though it was very simple. It was just like a 10 by 12 room. And the idea about this hotel was that this one elderly gentleman who used to visit the temple, this is how I remember it anyways, he convinced Satsrup that the temple wasn't good enough for Srila Prabhupada to stay in. He's Jagat Guru, spiritual master of the whole universe, so you should give him something very nice. So he actually volunteered. He rented the best hotel in Boston, which was the Four Seasons Hotel, the penthouse suite, and the devotees went and cleaned it, top to bottom, put vases with flowers and pictures of Krishna on the wall, and they got it all ready for Srila Prabhupada. But Prabhupada didn't go. And after that, they went and they got out the paintings and the flowers and they brought them back. But Prabhupada just slept for 2 nights on just a simple mat on the floor, and he stayed there. But he was very happy, and we were so happy that he actually wanted to stay there. So the next morning, I told this today that we were all getting ready for the fire sacrifice. One of my jobs was to break up the wood for the fire sacrifice, and we put it in a cardboard box, and it was in the temple. And actually, when Prabhupada came to at the sacrifice, they put a cushion in front of the cardboard box, and he was leaning up against this cardboard box, with the broken wood in it for the fire sacrifice. There's pictures of this. But when he went for his morning walk, he just, I wasn't there, but he wanted to go on the morning walk, and he just walked out of the temple, North Vegan Street. He took a left, walked down about 20 minutes. It was an industrial kind of area. They had like truck repair places along the road. He just walked chanting japa. He didn't speak much. He talked a little bit about ghosts. The old temple building when ISKCON Press was there, it used to be a funeral home, and it was a little ghostly haunted. But better, it was inhabited by Krishna and the devotees in Srila Prabhupada. So, anyways, when he came back and for the sacrifice, he just sat. He only sat on the Vyasa-san that one time. The other time, he actually sat in front of where the fire sacrifice was on a pillow on the floor, leaning up against his cardboard box, with the broken wood in it for the fire sacrifice. And he hadn't chanted on our beads yet, so as the fire sacrifice was starting to go, he was chanting japa, and we were all, just however wide the blanket was, we were sitting opposite him, and Srila Prabhupada was there chanting on japa, chanting on our beads, and then he would hang them on the microphone. So then eventually there was like 10 rows of beads hanging from the microphone. And I told today about how he chanted the prayers from the Brahma Samhita. And it was so wonderful. Just, he was reading with his glasses on. And it was I had never heard of the tune before. It wasn't like the one where we greet the deities. But it was something like, Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Jami. And he would, go on, and he chanted all of them so devotionally. And then he was calling up people to get their names. Somebody asked me about how I got my name, so I'll tell that. So when Srila Prabhupada called me up to get my name, I paid my obeisances in front of him. I was very nervous. And he asked me, how many rounds do you chant? And I said 16. He said, what are the 4 regular principles? And I said, no meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication. And I was like, oh, relief. I didn't mess that up anyways. But I was just kneeling on the floor in front of Srila Prabhupada. And he said, so your name is Somadas Das. And he said, Soma means the moon. And I was like looking at the floor, and I was thinking, the moon? I thought we were, supposed to get names of like Krishna Das or something. So I was thinking, is he making fun of me? And is he going to reject me? So I was like kind of scared. And when I was growing up, my favorite comic strips, with the Sunday comics, was Peanuts with Charlie Brown. The Americans will remember this. And I remember reading when I was a kid one day, this Charlie Brown is there in the comic strip. Lucy comes in and she says, hey, Charlie Brown, is that your head or is the moon out early? So I thought of this in front of Srila Prabhupada. I said, Soma means the moon. So, but at the same time, I was thinking, is he going to reject me? And so I was kneeling and I looked up into his face, and he was just effulgent. And he all of a sudden he just did this big smile, and it just lit up the whole room. And he said, "You are moon-like." And then everybody went, "Oh my God." He can see the soul. He looks right through you, knows everything that you did, but also your potential. So he was very kind. He accepted me, and he gave me my beads. And I actually have pictures of Srila Prabhupada handing me my beads at that time. And the very next devotee was my godbrother Sudas. And when he, same thing, he got called up, asked how many rounds you chant, what are the 4 regular principles. And he said, so your name is Sudas. He said, Sudas means very nice servant of Krishna. You understand? And he started to hand him his beads. And Sudas shook his head no. And then Prabhupada took the beads back. And he said, do you want to be or don't you? And then he went, yes. Prabhupada gave him the beads. So it was wonderful time and interesting. I think like 8 out of the 10 people that got initiated that day, their name began with S. We all had names that began with S. So, and then yeah, it was the Satsarupa Maharaj did the Abhishek, Srila Prabhupada polished Radharani. It was such a vivid thing to see Prabhupada sitting on the floor on this cushion, with a cardboard box behind with the wood, but just polishing Radharani, and then he would sit back and look at her, and he would polish some more and polish some more, and it was like he was right there, with Radharani doing this. That's Radha Gopi Vallabha here, and he also dressed them, and one of the little side things is that the dress didn't fit so well, and they had to bring some scissors and cut it a little bit and pin it. And Prabhupada, put the wigs on, put the crown on, and then they put them on. Prabhupada put them on the altar. Where Srila Prabhupada was sitting, the altar was on the left-hand side. And, also, though, there's a few little things. When Srila Prabhupada was in his room, he looked out of the room, and there was this little porch that was connected. The temple room was on the second floor, and that's where Srila Prabhupada was staying. But you could look out the window, and you saw the porch, and it had rained a few nights before. But from the painting, we had put some of the paint trays and the paint rollers on the porch. So when Srila Prabhupada looked out, he called Satsarupa over and he said, "Why are you wasting all this paint?" But he tried to explain, well, that's not just paint. It rained and it's water, but it was all white. But it wasn't so nice. But Srila Prabhupada was very, very observant, and he would always, see these things. He couldn't really hide anything from Srila Prabhupada. The other thing is where he stayed. We had the bathrooms only for Srila Prabhupada, but when you go down the hallway, the women's bathroom was on the left, the men's on the right, which Prabhupada was using. But there was a third door right in the middle that had been nailed shut a long time ago, but the doorknob was still there. And devotees, when they would go into the bathroom, they'd always hang their bead bag on the door handle. So Srila Prabhupada saw this, and Satsarupa was there, and Srila Prabhupada said, "Who has left their beads there crying?" And because there were so many other devotees from visiting temples, we had the devotees from Boston got initiated in the morning. They installed Radha Gopi Vallabha in the morning, but then they decided in the evening to have another sacrifice and have another initiation. So all the other visiting devotees could get initiated personally from Srila Prabhupada. So they had that fire sacrifice. There was a peacock feather fan, and I actually made a long wooden handle so that they could be fanning Srila Prabhupada while he was sitting there at the fire sacrifice. But somebody was, actually the handle wasn't that nice, but the handle broke actually. And so then they picked it up and they were just holding it by the peacock feathers, and they were still fanning Srila Prabhupada. I was just going to say something else about that fire sacrifice in the evening, but I can't remember. Anyways, so those were the two fire sacrifices that day. The next morning, when Srila Prabhupada had to go to the airport again, we all went to the airport. and we all went right in, with Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada was sitting, on the chair, and everybody else was sitting on the floor around him. And there was this one guest who, he was a photographer. And he actually, some of the videos that are of Srila Prabhupada in Boston in 1971 are made from this guest. His last name was Sugarman. I can't remember his first name. But there was also a video of Srila Prabhupada sitting in a rocking chair. And at first, Satsvarup Maharaj is asking some questions, but Srila Prabhupada didn't like it so much. He said, go get somebody else to ask the questions. So he just got one guest who was at the temple. He was a long-haired, hippie. And he started, asking the questions to Srila Prabhupada. And there is, the video of this. And you can see he was asking actually really nice questions. Prabhupada was responding, sitting in this rocking chair, rocking back and forth, on that second floor of the Boston Temple. But this person who did the videos, and he had a nice big professional camera, and he was taking pictures of Srila Prabhupada, hundreds of pictures. And Srila Prabhupada was sitting in the airport chair, and he was taking all these pictures, and he was getting closer and closer to Srila Prabhupada, taking close-ups of his face. And Prabhupada went like this to him. And he came a little closer, and Prabhupada took off his garland and put it on him. And gave him the garland. And, after Prabhupada had left, I went up to him and I said, how did all those pictures come out? And he kind of held his head. And he said, none of them came out. I don't know if I didn't advance the film or I kept the cap on the lens, but there are none of those pictures that he took. But anyways, Prabhupada gave him the garland. And, we were having a kirtan, and then, Srila Prabhupada got on the plane and watched them fly away. And that was when Srila Prabhupada came, 1971 to Boston. So thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Srila Prabhu. That's very enlightening. Thank you, His Holiness Swami Maharaj. That was very informative. We have many luminaries here. I take this opportunity to welcome His Holiness Radha Swami Maharaj and Her Grace Bhakti Devi also to ISKCON Boston. Let's welcome them by giving a big round of applause. We have His Grace Srila Prabhu just after Srila Prabhu kind of left, or maybe in 1971. Srila Prabhu was brought down from San Francisco to be a temple president at Boston, and he had then, of course, he led the ISKCON Boston there. By then, ISKCON Press already went to New York, and probably has been very, you can say that we're one of the stalwart temple president then, and that his temple presidency, this temple was purchased. So I think a lot of credit goes to him. So I take this opportunity and request His Grace Director to also share some of his memories about ISKCON Boston. Anything you can bring. A wonderful association with Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Vishwamati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namaste Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vishnu I think the fact that this wonderful temple is here and it's still here after so many years, it's testimony to how Krishna was doing everything in this movement. This movement was being carried on by Prabhupada's mercy because I was 1970, I was 21 years old at the time. How many of you boys and girls are 21 years old or less? Maybe two or three. Would you think, would you like to be the president of the temple here? 21 years old. But what I'm saying is that Srila Prabhupada even said sometimes that Krishna did not send me first class men. Prabhupada, but we were the proof that that Prabhupada was empowered, and he empowered even the young boys and girls that had absolutely no experience or qualification. At least myself, I had no experience or qualification. I didn't go to Harvard Business School or business management or anything like that. We were all just young boys and girls with no experience whatsoever. But the fact that they were able to buy a building like this, that's just Krishna's mercy that he was carrying on this movement. Lord Chaitanya was carrying on this movement, despite people like me, devotees like me. But it was very nice because when I arrived in Boston, what actually happened was that the devotee who had been the president in San Francisco, I had taken over the temple in Berkeley, which is right next to San Francisco. This devotee, his name was Keshava. He had actually started book distribution together with Buddhimanta Prabhu in San Francisco. And he had a very good inspiration that let me take this, because the devotees before that all around the movement had no idea for distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. They had not started yet. They had no idea how to do it. So he had the inspiration to let me take this idea to other temples. First he came here to Boston, then he went to New York, London, Australia, and that's how book distribution started like that. So I had been there in San Francisco, and in the beginning of the book distribution revolution, I understood I knew what to do. So that's the main reason he invited me. He called, and there was some problem with the president at that time. And so he called me, why don't you come out and do it? So, okay. And it was all based on the enthusiasm to distribute Prabhupada's books, because we had finally cracked the secret of how to do it. It's actually become possible. Because before that, all we would do is distribute Bhakti-Gada magazine, 25 cents. And no one could imagine anything more than that. Anyone could give more than 25 cents. And they would actually take a big book like that. But they had started it, some inspired devotees under the direction of Srila Prabhupada in San Francisco. They Manta, Premarnava, and many others, Yogesh Chandra, illustrious devotees. And then they began to move out and spread this mission of book distribution, which is Prabhupada's desire, like the spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada was saying. If you ever get money, print books, or if you ever get money, print books. So Prabhupada was printing books, but no one knew what to do with them. No one knew how to distribute them. So somehow or other this broke the ice in San Francisco, and then the second place was here in Boston. So I didn't know what to do. I had no idea of any kind of administration, management, but somehow or other I knew that if we could just all go out and distribute Prabhupada's books, then everything would be okay. Everything would work. And Prabhupada told me in the letter when I first started, I sent a letter to him saying, and he wrote back saying, just see that the regular program is carried on without fail, Mangalarti, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, reading books, chanting Hare Krishna, and then everything will be successful and distribute books. And he was very pleased, like as I said in the first letter I wrote to him that we were distributing so many books, 5 times more than before. And so he was so pleased. He encouraged us, especially, he said, flood the city of Boston. There's so many young people, so many students. Flood the city with our books, and this will establish the basis of our movement. And we'll be able to continue publishing more and more and more transcendental literature. And like I said, I wasn't here when Srila Prabhupada came. It was so nice to hear Srila Prabhupada came here. I came after that. Never saw Srila Prabhupada here in Boston. But I think because we took up that mission at one point, that we all went out, all the devotees, myself, and all the brahmacharis, the devotees that all went out distributing his books. And therefore we were blessed somehow or other. How could 10 young boys and girls buy on the fanciest street in Boston? That now it's worth a fortune. It didn't cost that much. It's a fortune. So that's just a proof that if we just follow Srila Prabhupada's instruction, we don't deviate, just try to go off to other different ideas, but we follow his program. Doesn't mean we can't distribute books in new and different ways. It doesn't mean that we can't preach and try to recruit. He said, recruit some intelligent people from the universities and colleges and train them. He said, train them up to be good preachers of Krishna consciousness. So we can do that. We may have creative ways to do that. But the goal is that distribute the books and recruit new devotees who can also take up the mission of spreading Krishna consciousness for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada. And if we do that, then he says guaranteed success, guaranteed that we'll be successful and expanding more and more. That's what I can say. But what we would do is we would go down to New York to see Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, at a certain point after his visit in 71, he didn't come here anymore. He was starting to, he said, we'll go to one central temple, the biggest temple, and then devotees from all of the East Coast, they can come and see him. In fact, he would go down regularly. Probably always pass through New York. His world travel, so we would go to see him in New York. At the time, the president was the devotee who was there this morning, Alimardan Prabhu. He was in charge of the temple. And because Keshava and Buddhimata, they'd gone to New York as well, they started a very, very enthusiastic distribution of Prabhupada's books. That temple was going very well. As we know, they purchased the skyscraper just by distributing books. Srila Prabhupada's Srila Prabhupada's books,
one of the most sincere devotees who had gone for Sankirtan movement and who had been associated with ISKCON Boston. So I would like to request you, Srila Prabhu, to speak something because he's our local devotee, ISKCON Boston. So please kindly share.
I wasn't expecting, but I'm happy to share. I guess I came to Boston in 1986 at the invitation of Niranjana Swami. I joined in 76 as an 18-year-old boy, and I was very involved in book distribution. Every day, we have what we call the sandwich program. We have Mangalarti, morning program, Tulsi Puja, Chant Japa, Bhagavatam class, Sadhu, out on book distribution all day. We had to do at least $100, which in those days was a lot of money. It was hard. It's like $1,000 today or something. And then we would come back in the evening, a little hot milk, a little popcorn, go to Arti, Bhagavad Gita class, big rest. and out again the next day. So I did that for 10 years. But after doing it for 10 years as a young boy, I could see that, okay, we managed to get some money out of them and give them a book. But we weren't really cultivating the people that were interested. So I had heard that there was a successful program in Europe where they called it contact sanctified. And people that would come to the temple or get a book out on the street, they would take their name and their phone number, address, and follow up with them. People that had shown some little interest, we follow up with them. So I had the desire to do this, and I actually went to Italy, trained under Srila Maharaj. Tradas was there when I went, 85. It was an ecstatic program. It was a very nice program they had. So I tried to bring back to this country. Most places they were like, so you want to replace book distribution with this idea? Forget it. What book distribution? I was distributing sets of books. So, but, you know, there was this idea that if you didn't live in the temple, forget it. You're in Maya. You can't surrender to Krishna. You know what I mean? So that didn't set well with me at all. And I saw that they had these non-Hutta programs in Europe that was very successful. Vedas was actually behind a lot of that. And he's still doing it in Bologna, in Italy. So I wanted to bring that here. It was not without challenges to do so. I actually tried in Washington, D.C. and other places. They said, okay, you want to help you back in the vehicle and money? Every, yeah, I'm still a kid and I was trying, you know. So I went to Europe and trained, and then I came back and I went to India for the Mayapur festival in 86, I believe it was. That time, Sriman Niranjana Swami had just taken sannyas in Mayapur. And I approached him. I said, Maharaj, I've been in Washington all these years distributing books, but I want to develop this contact center. I want to develop, not everybody can move in the temple. They need to learn prayers. They need to learn how to chant Hare Krishna in their house. They need to have pictures in their home. They need to learn how to offer prasadam. They can come to the temple. They can be devotees too. You know, not that they're not devotees because they can't be brahmacharis in the temple. So Maharaj said, I already have such a program in Boston. He had developed an entire database with floppy disk computers back in those days. Very slow. But he had developed an entire database, collected names from the Sunday feed programs in Warwick, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, and Fall River, Massachusetts, up in Nashua, New Hampshire, and up in Maine also. He said, I need somebody to run that program for me. So if you're getting all this feedback where you are, come to Boston. And I want you to take that program over. So I said, yes, if you can arrange it with the authorities, because I don't want to just defy the authorities and say go to hell. But if it's okay, I want to do it. So I came to Boston. I started developing the program with Niranjana Swami's help. I became membership director of the temple. And we would take Mangalarti suites, we had nice little boxes, the best suites in ISKCON. Nikoleshwar Prabhu used to make them. I see Chatamai confirming. The best sweets you ever tasted, Burfi, Pera, Sandesh, all these sweets. And I had a big case. They had this set of books in Europe called the Great Classics of India. Bhagavad Gita, First Canto Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna book, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and Nectar of Devotion. They were very nicely put together. So I ordered those from Europe. And I carried those in that case. I had a big poster of Prabhupada Srimad Bhagavatam, which could also be ordered if they wanted. And we started developing, not only working the database Maharaj already had developed, but developing more. He bought a computer for me, and I had my little office with a computer. We started going out with Jaipur Sundar and other devotees. And we had that database, and we, There's a certain number in Roxbury, there's a certain number in Dorchester, there's a certain number in South Boston. And we would go, knock on their door. Because if we called them, they'd make an excuse, you know. But when we knocked on their door, 9 times out of 10, I was wondering when you were going to come. Hare Krishna, come inside. And we would lay it out for them. I would have some beads, japa beads in the bag, and we would teach them chant Hare Krishna on the beads. They would take a set of books, and we had this program called EFT, Electronic Funds Transfer. And we said, you know, don't concentrate on what you can't do in Krishna consciousness. Do what you can. Give regularly money. So some people would sign up $151 monthly, $20 monthly. We put their names on the plaque outside as members. We made the life members package. They would always be welcome in the temple. We had a facility upstairs where they could come and stay with their family if they wanted to. And in this way, we encouraged people. We wanted to encourage them, especially teach them the prayer. So I also want to encourage all you wonderful Boston devotees who have been so accommodating. Thank you very much. I want to encourage you to teach the Americans this stuff too, not only Indian. It's hard for the Americans. They come here and they think, oh, it's Indian. If you're so kind and welcoming like you have been with us, then they'll also join. So follow up with them, get their name. You both send it on devotees. Don't just give them a book, get the donation, and leave. They'll throw the book. Get their name, the information. They give them a donation. That purifies them to the point where when they see you again, they may be a little curious. They may want to know more. 9 times out of 10, people would tell me, I knew you'd come. I was wondering when you were going to show up. I met old devotees from New York that had met Srila Prabhupada in the street when he went to Tompkins Square Park in Shanghai. And he said that same thing. I was wondering when you were going to come. We would lay it out. They would take a set of the great classics of India. They would take Japamala, and we would teach them the prayers. We had a little newsletter at that time called On the Way to Krishna. So I think it's a very important program. I was not satisfied just to get the donation and give them book. Half the time they're going to throw it away. You know what I mean? I want to make time for the people who are interested in Krishna consciousness. And that means you have to get their information. Develop a database, go there, knock on the door. The number tells you, I'm here to give you Krishna. And most of the time they'll say, yes, I want to learn more about Krishna. So tell me what you do. And we would encourage them to become life members. So that life membership at that time, I think it was $151 or $199. They get a full set of Srimad Bhagavatam in their home. That's a deity that they can install in their house. You know? So, Boston, we tried to develop that program. But of course, I had trouble living the brahmacharya life here after some time. So I had to be married. So I married in 91. Then we didn't really fit into the temple here. My own way in the world kind of thing. But that was my service. Became a membership director, become Krishna conscious, who didn't feel like they fit in the brahmacharya atmosphere. There was a lot of people that were very interested in Krishna consciousness. They couldn't become brahmacharya. We have to help them. So I'll go to Srila Prabhupada.
The gray color the gray color SUV on the back of the temple, 5K HM75. They didn't even park at the back. The neighbors is complaining, please. Otherwise, they tow the car and we don't want to enrage them. If anyone is here, we make sure that you remove the car as soon as possible. It's very hard. Gray SUV. No, it's not a Honda, but it's yeah, the make I don't know something. This is what information I have. But anyone who has parked the car in the back, then please make sure that it's illegally parked in the name is property. Thank you, Hare Krishna. So we have, let's move on. Thank you, Srila Prabhu. It's very difficult to get these personalities here. Krishna has showered so immense blessings that he has showered the stars, into our ISKCON Boston, and we have so many luminaries. We also have one more star amongst these wonderful Vaishnavas. We have His Grace Mitra Singh Guru, so we have this opportunity. Let's hear from him as well. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, please be seated and settle down. We'll serve the prashad exactly at 8:30. So then we can, have the darshan and then go. If this after the darshan, we will start serving the prashad. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Vedas was talking about book distribution beginning in San Francisco, and one of my friends, Jambavan, who you're never going to hear about. He's one of these really quiet people. But he was there in San Francisco in the early days. He drove the BBT truck. We used to, he would come to the temples and they would unload the books. The devotees would bring him some prasad and just have to rush off to the next temple. He was the younger brother of Yogesh Chandra. Okay, we can get off on the whole tangent about that. Okay, but first of all, I wanted to talk about the beginning of book distribution in San Francisco. Jambavan was there, and now Triana's already left to confirm things, but they said the temple, they had no money, and they were trying to figure out ways to get money. Keshava said he went and bought some cheap incense and some little begging bowls, and they said, just go out on the street, hand people a stick of incense, and ask, can you help us out? And so Buddhimanta said, hey, we've got these books. Like someone had mentioned earlier, there were cases of books. The Krishna book had been printed. Prabhupada sold them on the Rath Yatra day when they first arrived. He just held them up, wants to buy one. And of course, everybody wanted to buy one from Prabhupada. There were only a dozen of them in the box that day. But now they had cases and cases of them. They tried putting them in bookstores. They just weren't selling. And now they were like in a bind. We need money. We got to pay the rent. Buddhimanta said, can we try selling these books? Keshava said, sell anything you want. We got to pay the rent. So Buddhimanta took them out. And as somebody said, well, first he took it out on the street while they were chanting. Somebody bought one. He took them out again the next day. Somebody else bought a Krishna book. The next day, 2 books. They were onto something. That was a big deal, selling great big Krishna book. The books are like that big. There's 2 of them in a set. Shiny silver, with a picture of Krishna on the cover. Then Buddhimanta started going door to door. And somebody said, he would knock on the door and just get down on his knees. He said, please look at this book. Jambavan said, in those days, you could go and knock on someone's door and knock on the door and they'd be in the house and they'd just shout, it's open, come on in. The people were really friendly. So they'd walk in with the books. Said the hard part was not getting in the door. The hard part was leaving because people were fascinated. Like, what are you guys about? Have a glass of water. have some cookies, have some snacks, and they wouldn't let you go. So they were selling books. They went all over San Francisco. They went all over the Bay Area. Then they got into a van. It was a great big step van. I don't think they make those anymore, but it was a great big, like a delivery van, like the UPS trucks. Who was on that? I think it was Jayananda Sridhar that was in Bombay. A couple of others in Jumbavan. They went on the first traveling Sankirtan party. And further south, they ended up in Arizona. And people called the police on them. They thought they were aliens because they'd never seen anyone dressed like this. Really, they thought like somebody from another planet. So the police took them into the station, and the chief of police was in there, and they made their presentation, and Sridhar, who became Swami later on, what was his name before he was initiated? Whatever it was, he wasn't initiated then, but he just spoke so eloquently, and he said, and on behalf of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, we would like to present the chief of police of this town with one of our books. And because he did it so eloquently, he was flattering and like, okay, this is a cultural thing. And so Sridhar Swami, he was always like that. Anyway, those of you that didn't know him, he passed on 20 years ago. So those were the early days of book distribution in Bay Area, San Francisco, and then Trinidad learned there, came to Boston. It was really something. Rameshwar Swami gave a presentation about how poor the movement was in the late 60s. ISKCON Press, he talked about this series of letters where Prabhupada's writing back and forth. They're going to get this printing machine. And Prabhupada's trying to negotiate the price, bringing it down $200. He spends about 9 months back and forth, like just fighting over $200. Finally, they get it, and then they start the printing. But then, by the early 70s, when book distribution starts to happen, then he's going through this whole thing. How now the BBT has enough money; they're able to print these other books. The BBT, has a surplus of money, and he's making loans to the other temples. When they want to purchase a temple or some other large purchase, he loaned it out at 10%. So now he's got surplus money. He's making 10% income. He's helping the society. And we asked, well, how responsible were they at paying those loans back? And Rameshwar said, yeah, I was there. Everyone took it so seriously. We had to pay these loans back. So he was making 10% on the loans, books, and every year it was doubling. And so now he's loaning out like $1 million just from projects. It just grew and grew. Okay, one more, totally different topic. Since we're talking about Television riding in Boston, catching Sally Agarwal, and we sat with her. Bhakti Marg Swami asked her, what was it like being married to an Indian man in the late 50s? Sally Agarwal said, there could not have been anything more strange than that in Pennsylvania. And so then he asked, how did you meet him? And you guys ready for this story? And while she was telling the story, we were listening, and she's such a good storyteller. We were like sitting on the edge of our seats, like, you've got to meet him, because if you don't meet him, we don't get Srila Prabhupada, because it was because of her being an American citizen that her husband could sponsor Prabhupada to come here. So there was a dance, and somebody asked, we have this man, he needs a partner to go to the dance. He's from India. Would you mind? And she thought, well, okay. And it was weird. There were no Indian people in America at that time. They danced. They were friendly. They chatted a little bit, and then okay. And then the next week there was another dance, and he asked, "Could you be my partner again?" And okay. So that went on. There were a few meetings like that, and then he had to go back to his family in Agra, and he said, in those days we didn't express our feelings so much, and I was wondering if he felt the same way about me that I felt about him. So he was in Agra for a whole year, and they're writing letters back and forth, but it was never direct. You know, like how I'm feeling and what do we want to do. And so she was always, there was this tension. She told the story. And then finally, he sent a letter. I'll be coming. I'll be on this ship. We estimate we'll be here at this time. So she was reading the papers every day when is that ship coming into the harbor. Finally, it appeared in the harbor on the paper. He called her up. Hello, is this Sally? She forgot totally about his accent because they'd just been writing. And anyway, they got together, they put on the record, and they started dancing. And then he said, yes, let's do this. And she said yes. And then they got married. And then she, as she explained the story, her husband's father was always doing these different kinds of schemes. You guys live in America, that's an opportunity. Maybe we could do something that will bring some money and credit to the family. And there were other sadhus that he wanted them to sponsor, and nothing ever came from it. But then, so they filled out the form, and then they got the letter from Prabhupada saying, yes, I'll be coming. She looked at the picture, and she said, it was the most ugly person I've ever seen. She saw that picture, the passport photo, and they were scared. This person's coming to our little place, but as we saw in the movie that Jagabar, she fell in love with him. When they put him on the bus, she cried, thinking, how's he gonna fare in New York? I think we have to end here.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. So now the altar is going to open up and we'll have a darshan. So let's have the